GM everybody, welcome back to FraxCheck, your weekly Frax vibe check. I'm your host, Capital K, and this week, I call this week Wake Me Up When September Ends week. But before we jump in there, please smash that subscribe button, hit that like button because I sure need it because this 2 weeks have been hell putting this report together for you guys. And also check out our new website, flywheeldefi.com, and follow us on Twitter and Telegram at flywheeldefi. Now, I always jump straight to the source of truth via checking the chain. And let me tell y'all, the chain is sad. We are very, very sad. Like I said, as the name suggests, wake me up when September ends. But I'm here to give you the truth, the cold hard truth. And I hope y'all can handle it. Because right when we jump in, we have, bam, a big whammy down 10%. That's right, everybody. This is our flagship product, FrxETH. The flagship stablecoin is down another 10% over the last 2 weeks, down to 671.7 million frax. And I obviously took a step back and see how we performed since the beginning of the year. And we're actually down about 35% year to date. That is a big, big drop. But guys, remember this key element here. The fact that Frax was able to scale from $1 billion down to $670 million, that's $330 million scaling down, and the peg did not break. Like, that needs to be noted, and it's extremely laudable for a stablecoin to be able to ratchet up as well as ratcheting down. Okay. Speaking of peg, let's jump to it. So here on the dashboard, we saw a peg of 0.998 on the high to a low of 0.997. Now, when we went into the markets and we smashed the books with 100 million frax for USDC, we received an exchange rate of 0.992. This is, although this exchange rate is not what we want, right? We obviously want to see that number above 0.995 or 0.997. But one thing to note is that the USDC, the curve pool, the Frax USDC pool is massively imbalanced at almost 81 to 19. And here we still received an exchange rate of 0.992. So that's also something to say. Like, the peg would have broken a lot sooner if that was the only pool that we had. Fortunately, we have a ton of locked liquidity. And that leads me to our next slide, which is the balance sheet. Here, if y'all haven't checked this out yet, this is on fax.frax.finance. And this is a balance sheet literally broken down on a per block basis. So you could see exactly what the assets and the liabilities are at any second in time. So here we saw that the assets dropped by 74 million since the last Frax checks 2 weeks ago, and the liabilities also dropped by 74 million. So thank goodness our equity balance is unchanged at 66.3 million. Whew, that would have been sad if our buffer got even smaller. Now, here is on the next slide, we'll take a look at the collateralization ratio, and here's a kind of dirty behind the envelope math of looking at the collateralized ratio. So we take the total assets of 107 million, which is what you saw previously on the other slide. And then on the locked liquidity, we had 127 million. Subtract 2, you receive basically what I call treasury assets at 680.5 million. Now you divide that number by the 741 million frac supply. Again, all these numbers are pulled straight from the balance sheet. You receive a collateralization ratio of 91.8%. So effectively, we're 92% collateralized as of right now. Okay, so we were at a peak of 94.5% or 95%, but now we're down to 92%. Again, turbulent market, so ergo the collateralization ratio also drops. Now, moving on, we have our Frax BP, which is the liquidity as a service product. Here we have 330 million in TVL Sounds like a lot, but it actually is a massive drop of 25% since our last FraxCheck, which we had almost like 440 million in TVL. So big L here. But again, this is from the rebalancing. The scary part is even after the rebalancing, we still see a really large imbalance of 80-20 here as well. Now, on the utilization front, we facilitated about 20 million in trading volume this month so far in September. So it's been 19 days. Pretty bad on the utilization rate as well. All right, moving on. We have our Frax BP versus 3 pool versus Frax 3 CRV versus Frax PP. Okay, and that is 330 million for the Frax base pool, 220 million for the 3 pool, 10 million for Frax 3 CRV, and 129 million for Frax PP. If you add up all the Frax related pool, we're pretty much at 469 million. Above 220 million of 3 pool gives us about a 2.1x of 3 pool. Remember, we reached a height of like 3.3x or something at one point. So this is definitely going in through the lower range of the band. So moving on, we have the crowd favorite product though. Hopefully I can cheer you guys up a little bit. We do see a little green here at 1% increase in the FrxETH supply to 260,142 ETH. Where are these FrxETH hanging out? Well, I'll tell you, 72% of them are hanging out in as FrxETH. 20% is chilling in the FrxETH ETH pair, and 4% is hanging out in FrxETH and WETH pair. What's interesting here is that this pair saw a double up from 2% to 4% over the last 2 weeks. And the FrxETH and STETH pair is remained flat at 1%, and all else is the FrxETH that is literally out there in the ether, and that is at 3%. Now, remember, FrxETH is still a stable coin, except that it's pegged to ETH. So let's take a look at what that's cooking up. And here we saw the exchange rate of 0.9981. And this is my going to the curve pool and just smashing it with a 3,500 ETH order. Here you saw an exchange rate again of 0.9981. Interestingly, this pair is also slightly imbalanced at 76 to 24%. FrxETH and ETH is currently earning about 3.25%. No wonder the supply has been going down. No wonder the number of FrxETH has been going down that's in this pool and migrating to other pools in search of higher yields. But let's take a look at the landscape, right, of FrxETH, because we're not the only LSD in the game. And here, I am sad to report that over the last 2 weeks, we have not seen any growth in our market share. Rather, we are down slightly in our market share. Previously, we were at 2.2. Now we're at 2.16. Practically unchanged, but still kind of painful. What's even more painful, though, guys, is if you look at our 30-day change, we are at 3%, whereas our competitors such as RETH and STETH and CBETH is pulling in almost 6%. Not to mention, we got flipped by Binance Stake ETH 2 weeks ago, and those guys are growing at 377% over the last 30 days. Though granted, that is expected that would happen for Binance Stake ETH, because obviously it's Binance. It still hurts that we're no longer top 4, now we're top 5. And closing up behind us, there is Eigenlayer with around 970,000 staked ETH. So they also got a lot of love there. Remember, this is staked ETH, so you're kind of double counting here. But anyways, that is the current market share landscape. But one area that FrxETH remains dominant is in the yield department. And here we have 425 million in TVL, earning about 4.4% APY. This is pulled from DeFi Llama, so this is not just something the Frax team put together on our own dashboard. On the right-hand side, though, you'll see a dashboard or table that the Frax team did put together. And this is a representation of a simulation, rather, of what would have happened if you'd stake 1,000 ETH in as FrxETH versus Steth versus RETH and versus CBETH. Here, we see that over the last 6 months, okay, this is not even cherry picking, it's just literally over the last 6 months, you would have earned 40% more than RETH and 20% more than Steth if you had staked with FrxETH instead. Yields don't lie. Yields don't lie. Now, moving on to the, I like to call this the middle child product. It is FPI. As a reminder, in case everybody forgot, this is the Frax Price Index. So it tracks the CPI, the US CPI to be more exact. And this is the inflation rate, inflation pegged stablecoin. So no matter what, your buying power will not be diminished. And here we saw a little movement. We saw a 40 bips movement. That's about like 350K in US dollar terms, in increase in the supply. Another thing to note is that the annual inflation index increased from 3.3 to 3.7 since 2 weeks ago. And FPI, fortunately, right now is above peg by 63 basis points, leaving it with a treasury of 92.3 million, 37% of which is in the FPI Frax pair, which leaves us with an equity bonus, meaning if all the liabilities of FPI were to be met, the excess amount in the treasury is 3.6 million to be distributed to, who knows, VEFPIS or just to all FPIS. But that is not up for discussion yet, at least. So that is just the equity base that we see today. Now, here we have one of the first protocols, which is the Frax Lend. And we, Frax Lend is on a nice recovery track here ever since our crazy market up earlier in the end of August, early September, where we amassed massive liquidations and the market was just kind of cray-cray all around. Here we have 230 million in TVL, 62 million borrowed, which, and out of that, there's like a 90 million or so being lent out. So the utilization rate is 68%. We want to see this a little higher. We definitely want to see this closer to the mid 80s or somewhere around there. So it's definitely on the lower end. But like I said, everyone's frankly risk off a little bit, seeing that everyone got very hurt earlier this month / late last month. Anyways, moving on to the last leg of the DeFi Trinity, which is the Frax Swap. Here we saw a decrease of about 6% in TVL down to 60 million. And we facilitated about 19 million in volume so far this month, which is about 32% in utilization rate. Frankly, very, very low in terms of what we normally do. As you can kind of see in the graph there, it's kind of like teetering down. When I had a nice bump this last week, but overall we've been teetering downwards. Additionally, the volumes it represents, so on individual pairs as well, FXS and Frax is almost our best seller, and that used to be pulling in 15 mil per 7 days, but now is pulling in closer to 4 to 5. And as sad as it is to say, this just may be the new norm, that we only pull in about 4 to 5 million in volume every 7 days. Sigh. But anyways, let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about the profitability. So here's where you guys tell me, show me the money, and I will. On the next slide, check it out here. This is our Frax Lend AMO. Oh, but quick public service announcement. There is a kind of revamp going on of the AMO dashboard, which is now going to be migrated from the app.frax.finance website to the fax.frax.finance front end instead. So that's going to be where kind of your go-to place for all data sources. So there's something working on the back end there. So I will report back in next FraxCheck for the full detail. But so far, let's take a look at how Frax Lend is doing. Here, you see that we actually issued no new Frax, minted no new Frax, nor lent any new Frax for the last 2 weeks. But we still pulled in about 26K in revenue per week. So far right now, we have about 71K in revenue in September. So far, so good. And as it stands, like this has been pretty much the range between 24 to 26K per week for the last couple months now. So things are looking quite nice, quite nice. But that is it for FraxLend. On the other side of FraxLend, we have liquidations. Not everybody likes to talk about this, but it must be said. But fortunately, you guys have been good. You guys have been really good since the beginning of September here. We only have 5K in liquidations so far in September. And that is a lot lower than the 225K we saw last month. So good job, everybody, for staying safe out there. All right, cool. So now we take a look at FPI, the last or second to last revenue stream we have, and that is currently pulling in a loss of $321. Granted, remember last month FPI put in a whopping like 80K or like high 70K, so it's all right. It's all right. It's taking some time to pull in the rewards, but it's on the right track. At least we're not down bad. So here we're pretty much flat at negative $321. Next, we have our FrxETH. And here I'm trying something different. Normally, I take the other way around where I guesstimate what the APR is for the FrxETH. But instead, this week, this FraxCheck, I'm changing it. I'm taking the average income that we see on the dashboard of, again, fax.frax.finance. And we were receiving about 28.5 ETH in average income per day. I took that, multiplied it by 365 days, gets you 10,402 ETH. And then you multiply that by 8%, which is our FrxETH fee share, which gives us 832 ETH. Divide that by 12 months, gives us 69.3 ETH monthly, which translates to at about $114,000 at current prices of $1,650. So that means for September revenue so far, or rather September revenue, we have 114K. So that's what we have for the FrxETH revenue stream. Now, that is going to be a wrap up here, folks. And I just want to say the title of this FraxCheck again is Wake Me Up When September Ends. And that is going to be when I come and see you guys again for the next FraxCheck. So please be safe out there. Do not lever up too much. A little bit is okay, but don't go overboard. And if you want to find me on Twitter, you can follow me at 0x_K. And if you don't want to miss the next FraxCheck when September is finally over, please smash that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell, and give me a sympathy like here. Please give me a pity like. This has been just so painful putting this together. Not going to lie. It took me like almost twice as long as normal to put this together. And I think it's just because I was just so, demotivated to keep on going as each metrics was just worse than the last. But anyways, if you want to join the conversation, go to @FlywheelDeFi on Twitter and Telegram, and check out our new website, flywheeldefi.com. Guarantee if you haven't been there, you're missing out, because that's where a ton of other alpha is that's Frax related, but also general DeFi, culture related. And as always, this is Capital K, and I will catch you next 2 weeks. Peace.